Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. How is everybody out there in the viewership and the listenership of allpointstv.com during this afternoon? We're coming to you again at 2 o'clock. We're here every Monday from 2 to 3. And today we have a special treat. After this program is over, Satura's Black History Corner will come on from 3:30, and they'll probably be around to about 4 o'clock. But we're here from 2 to 3, and we are back for another edition of What's Going On. I'm George Moss, the host of the program. Last week I said that I was going to bring the book to the studio because I said that if I had the page number wrong, everybody's going to get a chicken dinner or steak. If I didn't have the page number right that I quoted last week in terms of this book by Wayne Perriman, and the name of the book is Whites, Blacks, and Racist Democrats. And of course, nobody wants to hear about racist Democrats. They want to hear about the Confederate flag, as if the flag, was waving itself. Okay, there was no political party attached to it. It was just up there waving. Okay, well, I said I was going to read page 172, which is the conclusion of Perriman's book. After he's gone through a lot of history about the Democratic Party, it starts in 1792 and it goes to 2010. And I just want to read you his conclusion about the racism in this country, that we have painted this country with too broad a brush, as if the entire country is over here beating down on folks and enslaving people and making them pick cotton, and it's the whole nation that was at it. And I want to read you the conclusion of a man that studied it. And this book is nothing but looking at, let me read the subtitle of the book. It says, The Untold History of Race and Politics Within the Democratic Party. Now, I don't know if they're going to talk about that or not down there, like in places like Memphis, Tennessee, where it's gotten to the point of crazy school now, where they're talking about digging up, exhuming the bodies of Confederate soldiers such as Nathan Forrest. This madman down here in Memphis, AC. What's AC? Is it Morrow? I think his last name is. I might have the last name. I know the politics of Memphis pretty well, having looked at it ever since Dr. King was struck down there. I've been keeping up with Memphis. But we have this mayor down there that came in after the mayor that preceded him stepped down. He was going to run for the post held by this Jewish representative named Cohen. He's going to run for his position in the Congress. And he played the race card, saying that the district that he's running in was carved out for blacks. And here we have a non-black that's holding the position there. It was never intended for him. And what is he doing in the post? I deserve it. And so you see the same racial politics being, of course he lost the position. And then the person took his place. The present mayor is in trouble because he's been doing a poor job, and he's being challenged by a whole lot of folks running in the election going to be held October the 6th in that city of 2015. And so he's in some trouble. Now he wants to go he wants to go out here and dig the bodies up of the Confederate. There's Nathan Forrest, as you probably know, was the one that set the Ku Klux Klan up in some say I think it's in 1865. Most persons say 1866. It would have began in Pulaski, Tennessee, and he's buried in Memphis at the state grounds there. His monument. They exhumed his body and put it underneath the monument that stands there as a testimony to his leadership as a Confederate soldier. And then later on, the Democratic Party used him and the flag and some of the other things in order to organize the Ku Klux Klan. And although I know they want to make a big stink about, we have to make a statement about how we are against the Confederate soldiers and we're against the Confederate the flag and all this. I'll tell you what they're not against. They're not against the Democratic Party, which was the political base from which the Confederate flag was in fact used after the war came to a close, and they used it for a racial purpose. People have gotten confused. This flag did not have a racial purpose during the war. It had a racial purpose after the war came to a close, and the Democratic Party made some use of it. I'm going to get to that before this program is over, because I want to go into the politics of that time period, and we're going to take these historians today to class. They need to go to class. I'm going to take them there because they don't know. Because I know what they're doing, and it won't hold water. And I brought to the studio the inaugural address that Lincoln delivered March the 4th, 1861, and we'll find everything we need in this speech. And we'll also go back to another speech Lincoln gave on the 27th of February, 1860. When he wasn't even expected to run for president. They hadn't even chosen the candidate at that time on the 27th of December the 27th of 27th of January, I think it was, where he gave his. It's either the 27th of January or the 27th of February of 1860, where he gave his speech at Cooper Hall, the Cooper Hall Union speech, where Lincoln said some things that would show that he was not going to tamper with the slaves in the southern states. And I think for good reason. I don't criticize Lincoln on that, because I'll explain what happened in that speech that you could read for yourself. In 1860, before he was the nominee. He didn't even know he was going to be the nominee of the Republican Party. There was no reason to suspect he would be that, because he had lost in 1858 to Stephen Douglas, who ran for the senatorial position, and Lincoln, who had served one term in the House of Representatives, had served there 2 years, didn't like his term, and then you would think that his national posturing as a candidate would have been over, but the way things unfolded, that speech that he gave in New York will revive Lincoln's national standing, and he will be the standard bearer for the Republican Party. And I'll break that down later on as to how those numbers played out in that particular election. I hope I can remember the numbers. If I can't, then I'm going to promise you another steak dinner, but you're not going to be eating a dinner on me. I'm not going to get it wrong. So here's what I said last week, and I said it's on page 172. So let me read you page 172, and you check it out and see if it's not there yourself. Because when I say I'm going to give you a steak dinner as cheap as I am, you can believe this, I'm on pretty steady ground. I'm not going to get it wrong. Okay, let's read what he says here in the conclusion in Perriman's book. Now, all of you historians listen closely, and all of you persons saying America is a racist society, and lo and behold, look at the white privilege and all these other things that are nonsensical, and people are making this stuff up out of whole cloth. But let me read you what Perriman says. For years, our nation and the entire white race have been wrongfully labeled and branded as racist because of the deeds of one political organization. It was this powerful organization that passed legislation, sponsored litigation, and formed terrorist organizations to harm African Americans. It is time to stop the blame game and place the responsibility on the one group that sponsored the most racist political agenda that our nation has ever known. And that group is the Democratic Party. Now let's see if Memphis is going to say that as they exhume these bodies. Let's see if they're going to mention that the party they belong to is the party he's talking about here. Strangely, hasn't been mentioned, has it? A political organization that has never apologized, nor have they ever attempted to apologize for the 200 years of atrocities that they committed against an entire race of people. And it goes on like that, but he's identified the culprits. Now, the 95% of blacks are voting in the Democratic Party, and they don't even know how ridiculous it is for them to be talking about the Confederate flag and how oppressive that is, and then be voted 95% of the time for the party that waved that flag in the aftermath of the Civil War and turned it into a flag of retribution, because what they were doing with that flag was using the battle flag of Virginia. It wasn't even a flag used, by the way, as a Confederate flag, because there were, you go back and look at the flags they used from 1861 to 1863, the stripes and bars. And look at the number of stars it had in it at the very beginning, because that flag would change 3 times over the course of the war, one of which was in 1860, because 6 states had met in February of 1861. They met there right before the inaugural address given by Abraham Lincoln. So they met there in Montgomery, Alabama. And there were 6 states that met there with South Carolina, which had succeeded from the Union by a convention that it called on December the 20th, 1860. They had called a convention, and that convention was in the state of South Carolina, where they had convened, called by both the state legislature and also by the governor of South Carolina. And they met there to, having sent delegates there, the delegates were selected on December the 7th of that year. And they are now meeting in convention in South Carolina, and they unanimously voted to succeed from the Union, and they did that as a single state. Now, in February the following year, in 1861, they are meeting there along with 5 other states, and there'll be a total of 6 states that have succeeded after they have met in that particular gathering in Montgomery, Alabama. And now 6 states have announced that they have succeeded from the Union. Texas has not yet joined at this point, but they will join, and they will be the 7th state. So what you see in this, the stripes and bars flag, is you'll see the flag being changed. First of all, having 6 stars in it. Then when Texas came aboard, then it had 7 stars. And then when the fighting started with the firing of Fort Sumter, which would have been April the 12th, 1861, and then you'll see 4 other states having seceded from the Union, and now the flag is being altered again to include all of the states, 11 states, and it will eventually have 13 stars, because the idea there is that they were claiming to have the states of Kentucky and Missouri also involved there, but Kentucky and Missouri never did join. And of course Maryland couldn't join, because Lincoln had put troops into Maryland, made sure that they dared not, because martial law had been, let's be honest here, martial law had been called, and he had troops there to make sure that their Congress, that their legislative body would not meet, because they were leaning toward secession also, particularly after they saw what Lincoln did in Fort Sumter, reinforcing it and provoking the firing on Fort Sumter. They were supposed to have given up that fort, and they were in negotiation in Washington under Buchanan to negotiate the transition from one status to the other status, the secession status. And Buchanan was was negotiating with that. They had representatives from South Carolina in Washington at the time that the shooting started, and they thought they were going to be able to negotiate their way out of it. But when the Fort Sumter was reinforced, after they moved out of Fort Moultrie, and they moved into that fort, which is much more defensible, not that much more defensible, but it was more defensible than Fort Moultrie was. When they began to restock that fort, then that's when the firing of Fort Sumter would have occurred. And the time had run out when they, and I've been in that fort, I did a study for the university, and I went into that fort as part of my, of the grant that 3 of us have been given to study some aspects of the Civil War. And I went into that fort to see what that looked like. And I learned a lot by being there. And then, of course, you get the dialogue from the curator who's there talking about what happened at the time that the firing would have occurred. It didn't last long once the firing started. I think it might have been within 24 hours where they were surrendering because they were shooting those cannonballs over there. And those, first of all, they would make sure they had balls. They were balls of fire that they were shooting into the fort. And of course, the ranking officers were in the back of the fort and at the front of the fort to put the corporals up there. And so they're taking pretty much all the fire. But the fire itself, every time those cannonballs hit in that fort, they got to fight these. The fire would be set inside of Fort Sumter, and they had to put these fires out, and that became unsustainable. And over a period of time, 24 hours later, they're telling them that your time's run out. And when time did run out, they gave them a couple of hours to hoist that flag of surrender. When they didn't do that, then through the provocation of Abraham Lincoln, because they knew he couldn't start this shooting, they had started from the other side in order to justify that they were defending the integrity of the Union and the federal fort, which had not been surrendered, although it was on South Carolina soil. They're making the case that this was a provocative act, and the provocation for war was actually enjoined by the southern states, which was not true. The provocation was Abraham Lincoln's provocation, and the South has succeeded, and therefore that fort is now on foreign soil. That is the Southern position in this altercation. Now, let's go back to the beginning of this drama, because I wanted to go back and look at the election of 1860, because it shows you how fractionalized the country was at this time. So let's go back and look at the 1860 election. And I'm going to try to quote this exactly the way it was at that time. I'm going to give you since you lost and getting a steak dinner on the book here, I'm going to give you a chance to redeem you get steak this time. So I'm going to try to give the numbers of the election and the candidates were running, and the states and the number of states they carried, and electoral votes each one of them got. If I can't do that, then everyone gets steak. You know, I have to tell you something. There won't be any food at my expense. I'm too cheap for that, so I got to be on point here. So let me see if I can put my mind together. This thing that the people in college were sitting at my desk trying to keep me from quote-unquote cheating because they could not believe I'm writing those answers down. Let's see here. There was in this election of 1960, you had the second largest turnout in American history as far as the percentage of voters coming out to the polls. 81.2% of the voters came out in this election. There's only one other election, by the way, in the history of this nation where you had a larger percentage of the voters that have come out in a national election as it did in this case. And this is the second largest percentage of voters, 81.2%. The largest number of voters that came out would be the ones that came, the voters that came out in the 1876 election, the one in which Rutherford B. Hayes ran against the candidate in the Democratic Party, where Rutherford B. Hayes in 1876 won, although he didn't have a plurality of the popular votes. Rutherford B. Hayes had 100,000 less popular votes than did the Democratic candidate, but because of the deal that was made in the back rooms, the election came out in Rutherford B. Hayes' favor. But there were 81.8% of the voters that turned out in that election, which shows you how interested people were in that election, because that was at the end of, that's what ended Reconstruction. So 81.2% of the voters went to the polls in 1860, and 81.8% went to the polls in 1876. And it just shows you the interest that they had. Now, when we get to the election today, we have President Obama telling us he wants us he wants to compel us to go to the poll and vote for them because people have awakened to the fact that they're voting for, what are they voting for? People don't think they have anything to vote for. They don't see any thing that comes out of the voting process, and so people are not going to the polls. And Obama was saying just recently that he would like to see a law passed where they compel the voters to go to the poll and vote. So the compulsion would be we have to go to the poll and vote for them since we have no confidence in them. But
they want a law for everything. I mean, this guy and his party comes up with a law for everything. I mean,
yes.
I mean, it's like we're gonna ask you to raise your hand and get permission to go use your bathroom because we got to conduct an environmental impact study first.
Yeah.
I never met a group of people that. I don't see a world where the land of the free. I can't. I mean, this is
You're the land of the politicians right now. Anytime, I can tell you right now, anytime the dominant influence in a society is that of the politicians, you're living in a police state. It is only when you're living in a country where the producers have a dominant influence are you living in a free state. And the reason for that is because in a state where the dominant influence and impulse is that of the producers, trade is the way in which it is carried out. When the politicians are the dominant influence, then force is the way it is carried out because they have the force of the state.
It's like, what I like about the corporations, I'm going to be on the other side of some people lately, and what I like about corporations, they kind of encourage people to be decadent and to be and to have a lot of vices, and they don't want to be your parent. They want to profit off of you coming and going. But these guys, I mean, they love you so much they want to constrict your life to like absurdity for adults. I mean, it just. And I don't know. I mean, I just don't understand it. These people and they think they're free. They're always called. I don't know where they get the term liberal. I don't understand where that. Cause liberal means basically what I always understood meant more free flowing, more allowance for things. But they're just directly the opposite of that.
Yes. Well, Milton Friedman was trying to explain that, and he didn't do a good job of it because now the terms have been flipped. So liberal is what conservative once was, and conservative is what liberal once was. So we have to go with the definition that are current, because you have a lot of things that are flipped and that are inverted. So I'm going to use the term in the way it's used right now. And in terms of the business angle of it, where you have corporatism, that's where the corporations will like to have the path of least resistance, and they want to employ government in order to force some things to be the case so that they can make profit without having the competition that's in place that make them have to do a better job of pleasing their customers. Well, you have to see. I don't mind the greed of the corporations. The greed doesn't bother me because even in that greed, they must please their customers. And what they did yesterday does not matter. They must please the customers today. Because every day, the customers demand that, what have you done for me lately? But when the government gets involved in it, then something else enters into the marketplace. And that is a certain amount of force. Government is force. And when it's employed by the business person, then that becomes a problem. Because no longer is competition going to rule the roost. We now have government favoritism coming into the marketplace, and that's always going to create a problem. Corporatism and mercantilism, but capitalism is not the problem. The problem is when the government gets into the fray.
Well, I was going to say, I just love it too. Government guys, these guys in the government, Republicans or Democrats, both. Guys who are failures and everything else, but they were good, straight-faced liars. They've been went to politics, and they never had anything successful outside of being able to lie to people bull-facedly and get elected. Now they want to tell business people what they should pay people, what they should have to do for the corporate structure. These people wouldn't even know how to run a lemonade stand.
Yeah, that's right.
And they think they're experts at all things.
Yes. Well, Ayn Rand made that point, John, and you read her work, so you know it as well as I do. That the people that are the producers have to get the permission to produce from those who produce nothing. So what's wrong with that picture? Everything's wrong with it. Let me say that the corporations operate out of greed, but greed is a good thing when it's allowed to enter into the marketplace. And I have a good example of it in my home. I have some of the oldest television sets that you can imagine. One is a floor model, and I bought that model in 1991. Now this is how many years later? And that model, I put the remote control there and turn it on, and the picture is just as good as it was the day that I bought it. And why does that TV set work all these years later? Because if it doesn't work and if it blows out, then you go out and start talking about the company, about this cheap stuff that they made, and you're not going to do anything with that company again. And your friends are hearing you talk about it, and they're spreading it around. They cannot allow for their product to be defective, and it hasn't won in all those years. But so how do they compensate for that? Well, let's say you're a quality product, but how do they compensate for that in terms of satisfying their greed? Because their greed is really to have repeat customers. If you don't have repeat customers, you don't stay in business.
I'm going to bring this point up right here. Bernie Sanders, the guy wants the communist that's running for office. He's bitching basically about complaining about the cable Comcast rates. It's because of government saying we're not going to allow different groups of people to come into our cities. We're stuck with one provider. They're supposed to meet all kinds of criteria to get this this allowance to be a monopoly in the area, and then they return around like they closed Comcast closed their public access studio here in Flint years ago. That's the reason why we have some shows here now. Is because a few of those people that we used to do their show there didn't feel like going to Detroit. But Comcast is supposed to have and maintain a studio here in Flint area. But now it's like I'm just bringing this up because it's government interference causes these corporations to gain this monopoly. Mm-hmm. And then people like Sanders whines about it.
Yeah,
and it's people like him has caused the problem in the first place.
Yes, Bernie Sanders is a nut, and he doesn't know anything, and that's true of all of them. Now he's probably a little bit more informed than the rest of the mob, but anytime you tell me that you're a democratic socialist, you're a nut.
But my grandfather used to say that's the reason why my own grandfather. It's my mom's dad used to call himself a Democrat socialist.
Yeah, that's an oxymoron, because you can't be democratic and be socialist. Socialist is more state involvement, and Bernie Sanders is a communist. But if he came out and said that, with the fact that we've gone through the McCarthy period and some other things, you come out and say that you're a communist, outright communist. We're going to reflect back on when we kind of arguing with the people over there in Russia about this, and what are people over here now running it out in the political process in this country, and they come out admitting that. So now, they are, look at these qualifying terms where they use an adjective to modify the noun, so they're not a socialist; they are democratic socialists. They put that word there, and so you hear democratic, and then your concern is lowered. Your threshold of non-acceptance is lowered, and it doesn't sound quite as bad. Well, we say democracy, and people know that's majoritarian types of things in the political process, so it's not quite as frightening. If he said he's a socialist, I can tell you right now, he's not only not going to be running for president and be pulling the crowd he's pulling, he wouldn't be the senator from Vermont. And that's how they hide themselves. And the Democratic Party should come out and admit what it is, but they're not going to do that. But Howard Stern had it right when he was talking about that group. I was saying, though, I don't want to lose where I was in terms of the point I was making about how they compensate for making a quality product, at the same time compensate for their greed. And the way they do that is that they make a quality product, but they want repeat customers too. And if that product lasts forever and ever and ever, as my TV sets in my family room, that TV set is going full blast, and I'm not buying a TV set as long as it's still working. So how do they compensate for people like me? Not like me, because I don't care what you do. I'm not going to get rid of it as long as it's working. But how do they compensate with persons that want to keep up with the Joneses? You know how what they do with those persons is they don't make a defective product, but greed is still a factor in what and how they operate their business. So the way they do it in their case is they wear it out in your mind. Go read Vance Packer's book called The Hidden Persuaders. You see what they do is they change the way the design is. That TV set on that floor, that thing takes up a whole room. Now they got one to put on the walls. It's a flat screen. You got to have that, and it's high definition. So the old TV set, they've worn it out in your mind because it looks obsolete. Well, you know, as long as here's Moss's philosophy that you're not using me that way. As long as that picture comes on that screen, I can make out the images on the screen. You know, I can get HD. Not on every channel, but the Comcast that I do, they have some stations that are HD and some that are not. If I watch Fox News, for example, some of that is HD. You know, if channel 50 is one of the stations, then you go to its HD stations, 200 and something on the other. It's the same network, but it's another channel on the Comcast dial, and they have an HD. And I would prefer on a large screen to watch an HD, but my screens are not large screens. I don't lose a lot of definition in terms of the high definition results you have. I got a friend that has a screen that's wider than this wall here. Well, you have to have HD for that because it breaks up and it's not as clear if the screen is large. But on a small screen, you can't hardly tell the difference. But I haven't bought a new TV set because I don't care how obsolete it may look as long as it works. You know, I even know another example of the same thing. You know, a lot of people run around the block, and they're doing all these exercises, and they want to stay in shape, and they got these things in their hands, and they run around with these little barbells, small barbells, so they're getting their arms exercised and legs exercised while they're running, and their heart palpitation is increasing, the heart rate is increasing because they're running. Well, you know, they had this lawnmower that would work all the muscles in your body. You remember the one you would pull this way and you push that way? That's almost like aerobics, right? Your arms are moving out and moving back because you have to pull it back and cut again. That's good exercise. And your legs are pushing it because you got to push them more because they didn't have any power to it, and you get all exercise. But people threw that lawnmower out of there. When they had the one, you start pulling it this way and it goes to use gasoline in it and oil and use less manpower. But why did you do that? Particularly if you believe in exercising, because it was worn out in your mind. It wasn't nothing wrong with the lawnmower. It was not. It was, in other words, it was innovated out of your tool shed, and those TV sets are innovated out of your house. They're not worn out in your house. They're innovated out of your house. And that's how the business person satisfies the consumer. You know, please me is what the consumer is saying. And do that on a regular basis and do it every time I come to your business, because what you did yesterday doesn't count. It's what you did for me later. What have you done for me lately? That's Janet Jackson. I just want you to know I'm keeping up with all the latest hits. That's not the latest hit, though. That goes on. So that's back in the day.
That was in the 80s. Okay.
Yeah, that's the last time I listened to the radio. I wake up to the radio and I turn it off. But you know, they have to innovate it out of your house, and they innovate it by wearing it out in your mind. And so that's old. It's like it's outdated. It doesn't look like it's the modern thing. So this flat screen comes in, and they got some other innovations down the road, and they're going to find a way in which they can get that outdated, and they're going to keep on selling because they have to have repeat customers. And if they can't have repeat customers, then they go out of business. I've been to some restaurants, and I was telling my friends, I said they're not going to be here long because we certainly were not going to go back. The food wasn't that. Some new restaurants came in, the food wasn't that good, and so they get us one time, and they get the next customers one time. But unless you have people that come back over and over again, and you get new customers coming in, but the repeats coming in over and over again, then that's how you make your profit. So greed doesn't bother me because I know the greed is that, and monopoly doesn't bother me. The question is, how did they get the monopoly? If the monopoly is not through coercion and force, and there can't be coercion and force unless the government is involved in it, because the monopoly comes out of you doing more, you being more competitive than your than your competitor, and if he's not competitive, he's driven out of business. And I have no problem with a monopoly therefore existing because the person could not compete. Now people think, well, when you have a monopoly, then what that means is that the person who you ran out of business, since he's not there anymore, you can raise your prices sky high.
Did you hear about did you see the fervor over the Snyder doing away with the tax credit for the film industry in Michigan? And people are like, so this is outrageous. He's stupid. He's an idiot. And I don't like Snyder either. I don't. Okay, they're always saying, but okay, isn't it weird though? Because it's the movie industry, even though it's basically anything like any other corporation would be asking for a break. It's okay to do that because, see, all these people are enamored with the potential for the connection to celebrity. That's what they're hoping for. And actually, it's been around for like 15 years or something like this, and it really hasn't fleshed out as much as it should have. And people made points. They came for a while. They were staying at hotels for a while. There was no permanent jobs created, really, that we can see. But these people are so hopeful. Their lives are so pathetic that they're leaning towards they're hoping, well, let's give these guys all these tax credits so they can stay, they'll come here. But okay, but if it was a mom and pop grocery store that was being set up on by officials and officialdom for minutia of enforcement laws, they'd be fine. They wouldn't say anything.
Yeah.
I mean, who's going to stick around? The mom and pop place, the guy who's going to set up a grocery store, a gas station, or a whatever bookstore. A few years ago here in Flint, they had a big thing over on Corona Road. A guy opened a bookstore, and the city tried to shut this guy down. A bookstore, a used bookstore. Yeah. They said they didn't need more places like that. A used bookstore. I don't see where that's environmentally an unsound place. Yeah, and so, but yeah, everybody's so enamored and so like pissed off at Snyder for, about eliminating that credit. Well, it wasn't paying out. I think all businesses should be encouraged to come here. So I think they got undue preference.
If they come here as a business, the tax break should be a certainty. You see New York doing it. They understand that they can't be doing what California is doing. The reason why Hollywood is in Michigan and doing these films in the first place is because of the taxes that are prohibitive in California. Hollywood didn't make movies anymore because it's prohibitive. The taxes are too... Oprah Winfrey has a house in California, and she has her accountants that keep up with the number of days that she's been at that particular home in California, because if she's there more than half the year, then that's her residence, and then she pays taxes accordingly. So she's there so many days of the year, and she's elsewhere because she didn't want to have that tax placed upon her estate. I think the government needs to understand that if they're going to do anything that is energizing as far as the economy is concerned, what you have to do is look at the taxes, because taxes you put the money in the hands of the consumers, because they're voting for each time they spend their dollars, they're voting for businesses to stay open or businesses to close, and the proprietors of the business have to compete for those dollars that are in circulation. They're being spent by consumers who have the right to freedom in the marketplace, and they are voting for which of those businesses will remain open and which ones will close down. And that's how it should operate. Let the consumers decide, and let the buyers beware when the government gets involved, because the buyers only have to beware when you have a mandate that is in fact from the government. Because I tell you right now, ain't no business that will come in here and displease their customers, because they know what time it is for that. They're going out of here because the customers have a free will or whether they are going to participate or not to participate. And you can see where I'm going with this in terms of Obamacare, where the government actually said they can make you, they can enjoin you through Obamacare and make you buy a product. They can make you buy health care against your will. And you can see how contradictory that is to the claims of a free society and a free market. By the way, we haven't had a free market in this country since 1913, when we set up the Federal Reserve System. Once you did that, and the government therefore is controlling the money supply, basically through the things that has happened to Greece, and that's what we're looking at right now over there in Europe. I wish they hadn't bailed them out, but if they didn't bail them out, the catch-22 is then the European Union goes under. So they have to bail them out. The contradiction is, no matter what they do, it's not going to work, because at the bottom of it is the socialist underpinnings of the system. It's not all those countries in Europe are social systems, and what they've tried to do here, since it doesn't work on a national scale, they're trying to back up each other's economists, the ones that are strongest, backing up those that are weakest, but the weakest ones are going to bring down the strongest ones in the EU. And at some point, when Germany keeps getting the short end of the straw, they're going to rebel, and when that happens, it's over anyway.
Well, did you hear Greece, though, when they started talking about that and the money they owe Germany? They started dredging up the stuff that happened during World War II. Like, you owe us this. I went, oh my God. It's like, let's pull this out of thin air.
Yeah.
And use, I mean, you guys have cut, I mean, it's just absurd. But I mean, they've seen Americans get away with it, though. So
yes. They're just, if it doesn't work on a national level, it's not going to work on an international level either. And that's what, and so the socialists, look, the problem is socialism. And it has not worked anywhere in history. And I don't know how many times we have to teach that. You know, I mean, Venezuela, I mean, was that an example? What about the Soviet Union and all these other structures? We have all these models in history, and not a single one has ever worked, and yet these politicians will not give up on the idea that we can run it from the government. That's what socialism is. That we have these busybodies, these know-it-alls, and they can just simply from the mountaintop, you know, like for example with the minimum wage, they can get in a room full of cigar smoke, and they just simply can come up with a number that they're pulling out of a hat. One person says 1010, that's not big enough for the next person because he's got to go one up above that. And so they say in Washington State, $15, and then some other people will copy that, and before you know it, and you're arguing with these people, these nuts that don't understand economics on these radio shows, and they're saying that that's a good thing, and you ask them, then why don't we set the minimum wage at $1,000, since it's a good thing to pull rabbits out of a hat, as if numbers can do what rabbits do when you're doing magical tricks. And since it's magic, why don't we use some of that magic in the economics thing? We just simply raise it to the point where there's no poverty at all. Let's just simply pass a law against poverty.
Well, it's like, did you hear that one organization that pushed for the minimum wage to be increased? Turned around petition after it was passed so they can continue paying their people at a lower rate than the one they already the rate they already pushed for.
Yeah,
there's astonishingly hypocritical.
Yeah, they're hypocritical, and if they would be honest, and who is ever honest in the political arena? I mean, by the very definition of politics, you're a crook. And so that anybody thinking we're going to solve these problems through the political arena and through a particular politician, you can forget that right now. There's no history of that ever having taken place in the past. And it's just many different things you can say about it. But there are not going to be any political solutions to any of the problems we're facing in this country. They're just trade-offs in politics. It's just like medicine, you know. They tell you on these commercials of medicine that, and they're almost telling you in a very calm voice, even telling you it can in fact kill you, but they're saying it so calmly. But they're treating this symptom, this problem, and let me just take Cialis for example. I just heard that one before I came to the studio, and they say, you know, Cialis will in fact cause this, and this, and this, and it can cause all these different things you didn't have, but you're treating erectile, forgive me for mentioning that on the air, this dysfunction. And maybe that's the way nature has it ordered, so we don't have everybody overpopulating the planet. I mean, some of us not supposed to be out here acting like we are a youngster. And so that's birth control. But, you know, we're not satisfied with that. So they got a pill now that they call it I never even heard about erectile dysfunction. I heard about old age. That's what I heard about when I was coming up. And so everybody now is supposed like you're not supposed to get off the dance floor. But then in treating erectile dysfunction, it talks about all these other things that it causes. So it treats this, but did you have a problem with all these other things before that? No. What the medicine is doing is not even medicine, it's a drug. It's a synthetic you put in your body. So it treats this, but a trade-off in terms of, okay, here's your choice. Do it's Etta James song. I'd rather go blind, boy, than to see you talking, child. That's her song, right? Well, would you rather go blind, or would you rather not be able to engage in sex? And I'll tell you how they do that commercial. I mean, some people are not supposed to be out here, having sex. That's how. I mean, it's just like birth control. It's like, for example, the sexual act is very pleasurable, but you know what? The birth is very painful. Why would that be the case? Pleasurable and not so pleasurable. Because if both of them are pleasurable, you'd be having children every day. That's birth control. That's how nature is ordered balance. But they can get around that. So they tell you all the things that it causes, and because there is a trade-off. And the trade-off to me is more harmful than what they're fixing. But the way they do that is they tell you to call your doctor if you have if your situation lasts more than 4 hours. Call your doctor. Don't call. Who's gonna call the doctor? You're gonna call over some more girlfriends, and they know that you're happy with that result. But the reason why they say 4 hours is because anything goes past 4 hours, that is harmful. If it goes to 6 hours, you got a real problem. And they know that. They know 4 hours you can survive. In 6 hours, you're probably dead. And that's what they're telling you in that commercial. But what they tell you to do, after telling you all the harmful things that Cialis will do, and that other one they had before Cialis will do, they'll tell you not to ask the doctor if it's safe for you to take the drug, which is what they've been describing for the last 45 seconds of the commercial, because they got to tell you all the dangers that it poses for you. 15 seconds about what it will fix, 45 seconds about what it breaks, and the way they get you not to worry about that is by telling you how long the drug lasts, the synthetic in your body lasts, and then they tell you at the end to ask your doctor if your heart is strong enough to have sex. Well, they describe it as sex.
Well, another thing is, they say, well, tell your doctor if you're on this. Tell your doctor if you're on that. Tell your doctor if you got this. If she's your doctor, shouldn't he be aware of this?
Yes.
I mean, another thing is, too, they go on with all the list of negative side effects potential. You're saying, okay, now, why was I supposed to be taking this?
John, it's all, people got to figure this stuff out. And I guarantee you, if we start thinking in this society, very few things get past us, but they want a non-thinking population. The drug company, 85% of the commercials on television are the commercials put on by the pharmaceutical industry, because that's a multi-billion-dollar apparatus. And they have this. What's this one called? I better not mention it on the air because they may come back and talk about suing me. But they got this one drug. They got these names for it. Where do these names come from? One is called, I will mention this one, but I won't talk about the drug itself. I just mention the name and just say that why did that name get chosen? It's called Fox Eagle. I think it's called Foxiga. And they got the word farce in the name. Farce. It's not F-A-R-C-E. They spell it with an X. So you don't see they're telling you it's a farce. I mean, the names that they give these drugs, and then some of them you say, wow, it sounds like it's going to actually do something because it sounds chemical. And they give you a lot of chemical things, and you can't understand the chemistry that's involved in it. I mean, they'll say things like dextrose, like on the salt box. And you say, okay, now why am I pouring? I used to ask as a kid, why am I pouring this salt on the watermelon, and why does it seem like it gets a little more sugary taste to it when the salt is on there? Because it brings out both, the taste buds are salivating because they're getting two different impulses, two different stimulus at the same time. Salt and sugar are opposite of each other, so that you're getting both sensations. So you put the salt on there. Why would that make it seem like it's more sweet? Because dextrose is just another name for sugar. But if they put sugar on there and your parents are telling you that you can't have any sugar, then they cut down on the salt and they want to sell the salt. So it's a lot of different psychologists is involved in it. And if they want to ask your doctor if you're able to have sex, if any doctor in his right mind that wants your business will say no, I'll tell you what you're going to do with that doctor. He's fired, and you got to get a second opinion because you're not going to listen to him. What does he know? And so no doctor in his right mind that wants that business, wants that repeat customer coming back to him again, is going to say no. Because if they say no, he's out of there. That's the way that works. And they know that no doctor's going to say that you are not healthy to have sex. You know why? Because they weren't describing sex in the first place. They were describing the medicine. It was a switcheroo that you didn't see the equivalent of a pea underneath those shells. You know how they switch it around? Well, you saw that was a distraction. And they use that, and politicians use that, and business people use that. It's just used. And you have to be able to watch the hand as it's moving and be able to identify where the P is. And the P is not in what they're saying. The P is you understanding the import of that conversation they're putting in front of you. And don't let the calm voice, lull you to sleep. Because that just is to get past the frontal lobe, get to the place where you're making your decision, the back of your in the back of your mind, past the cerebellum, I think it is, into the medulla and those parts of the brain, where you make your decision. Because most of it is post-hypnotic suggestion, where you're not going to run out to the store while you're watching the commercial and go and buy anything. You're going to do that later on. Well, that's how they operate. Let me deal with, before I get off the air, let me deal with the 1860 election, because I just don't see any understanding of the Confederate flag out here, and I've got to get people to understand how you're being railroaded by these politicians who are some of the most, I have to say this out front because this is true, some of the most dangerous persons that operate in any society are the politicians, and that's in every society where they are. They are the pariahs on the planet. They're the ones that keep the producers from producing because they want the influence of that. And really, they're the ones that really have endangered Greece. You look at these countries in Europe, in the EU, and all those countries are endangered. If they're not endangered by the economy because of the socialist practice by the politicians who want the credit for having taken the money up out of the economy and then distributing in their names for political advantage, which is why it's hard to get these incumbents out of there. If they're not causing a problem that way, they're causing a problem in Europe by what we have in these countries that are jihadists. And over here, they're trying to act like they're getting on the net, and they're being radicalized. They're being radicalized on the net. If you believe that they're over here peaceful, and they get on the net and they're being radicalized because ISIS is over there telling them that we want y'all to bomb over here. And that's why they were had the guns out on July the 4th because they were expecting a bombing. Let me tell you something. What that distraction is about is that they're distracting you away from the immigration policies of this country. That has nothing to do with anybody getting on the internet and somebody typing in some words and you typing some words back and they're influencing you. Those radicals are here in this country because the jihadists are here. And the jihadists are here because they let them in the country. And so you can just get off that right now. You can also get off this thing about this Confederate flag. Let me take you to the election of 1860. Let me see if I can do something with that. And if I get these numbers wrong, then since you lost out in my bringing this book last week, and I gave you the page number if I have in the book, and then I read the page number to you and showed it was there, and I told you if it was not on that page, you're going to get the steak dinner. Well, I'm going to give you a chance to win. I'm going to give you a chance to hit the lottery right here at allpointstv.com. And you get a steak dinner if I get these numbers wrong. But I'm not going to get these numbers wrong because you're not getting a steak dinner on me. I'm too cheap for that. But let me take you to the election of 1860, let you see what was going on here in this election. In 1860, you had 4 candidates running, and there was a very big turnout in this election. 81.2% of the voters came out for this election. And it was only exceeded one time It had never been exceeded in that number of voters before. It has only been exceeded one time after that election. That's in 1876 with the election of Rutherford B. Hayes that was running against Samuel Clemens in the election of 1876 when Rutherford B. Hayes became president because of backroom dealings that went on when he had 165 electoral votes and his opponent had 184 electoral votes, but 3 states had sent in 3 different sets of returns. Louisiana, these were unreconstructed states, Louisiana, Florida, and South Carolina. And there were 20 electoral votes involved in that, in those results. And when the electoral votes are sent to the House of Representatives, they open them up and they see what the votes were in those states. And the Democratic candidate, this was Tilden, it wasn't Samuel Clemens, it was Samuel Tilden. Tilden had 184 electoral votes, he needed 185 to win. Rutherford B. Hayes had 165 electoral votes, and he needed 20 to win. 185 would carry the day. And they made an agreement in the back room. The 20 electoral votes that were in some question mark about it, all 20 went to Rutherford B. Hayes. Samuel Tilden didn't get any of those, and that's how he became president. Now in that election, they had 81.8%. 81.8% of the voters came out. We haven't had those numbers since, and those are the 2 largest elections that we had. Now in the Lincoln election, 1860, and if any of these numbers are wrong, everyone eat steak. Let them. It will not be what they said during the French Revolution. Let them eat cake. This will not be cake. This will be steak. Paid for by allpointstv.com. I'm going to get the whole studio involved in that. The studio has to pay, but I'm not going to get the studio behind the 8-ball either. In 1860, you had 4 candidates running for the in the election, and they were Abraham Lincoln. Let me do this real quickly. Abraham Lincoln, John Breckinridge, and running from Kentucky, running as a Southern Democrat. On the Constitution Union Party, you had John Bell. He's from Tennessee, and he's running as on the Constitution Union Party. And the idea of that is have the Union and under the Constitution, and running on that, it will calm the waters down, because the Constitution allows for slavery. That satisfies the South. The Constitution being followed, then it brings the others into it, and they're going to unify the nation under that banner. So John Bell is running in that, for that. On the Northern Democrat side was Stephen Douglas again. Douglas had run against Abraham Lincoln in 1858 for the senatorial position. And he's running as the Democrat from Illinois. So we got the Northern Democratic Party, and he's representing that, and we got the Southern Democratic Party, and John Bell is representing, John Breckinridge is running that. Bell's running on the Constitution Union Party. Now there are 303 electoral votes cast in this election. In the popular vote, Lincoln gets, check these numbers out and see if this is not true. Don't waste your time. Lincoln gets 39.7% of the vote in 1860, less than 40% of the popular vote. It's split 4 ways. He gets less than 40% of the popular vote, but because he got 180 electoral votes, he gets 59% of the electoral votes. Let's see. John Breckinridge running in the Southern Democratic Party, he gets 72 electoral votes. He carries 12 states. Lincoln carries 18 states. 18. He carries 11 states. Breckinridge carries 11 states. John Bell, who's running in the Constitution Union Party, gets 39 electoral votes. That's right, 39 electoral votes. He carries 3 states. And Stephen Douglas gets 12 electoral votes. He carries 1 state. All that total up to 303 electoral votes in the comes up to 33 states that were in the Union, and that were 33 states at that time. All of them are in the Union because nobody succeeded at this point. But when Lincoln gets elected, and that's a surety, then the secession is going to start the following month. There will be 34 states eventually, and that is because Lincoln is against secession when it came down to seceding from the Union, but he's not against secession in terms of West Virginia seceding from Virginia. And so you'll have West Virginia, which did not go along with secession when Virginia came out of the Union, so that state will succeed, and it's seceded from another state. So 34 states now all together. So the electoral was 303 electoral votes. The South is leaving out of the Union. First of all, 6 states. Then Texas joins, 7 states. Then Fort Sumter happens, 4 more states. And the flag, not this flag they call the Confederate flag, because that flag doesn't even exist in history. The Confederate flag is the stars and the stripes and bars. The stars and bars. That's the Confederate flag. This Confederate flag they're talking about right now was never hoisted over a single state in the Confederacy. Certainly not over the Confederacy in Virginia, where the seat of the government was. That flag never was there. So after Lincoln is elected, they're out of there. Now, I don't have enough time to go into it. I'm going to go into it next week with the speech of Abraham Lincoln they gave on March the 4th, 1861 in his inaugural address. I will read you this speech right here and go through that speech with you to let you see that there was no threat of Lincoln doing anything about slavery as it existed in the Union at that time. And if you don't take his word for it there, go look at his Cooper Union speech that was February, now that I'm thinking about it more clearly, it was January 27th, 1860, where he spoke in New York, and that re-energizes his campaign because Lincoln was out of here at that point, but that speech re-energized his campaign. Go read what Lincoln said there. Slavery was under no stress where it existed at that time under the Lincoln administration, and the South was aware of that. And when I read this next week, you'll see that Lincoln was aware that they were aware of it. So what was the problem then? The problem was not slavery. The problem, in fact, slavery was secure in the Union. The problem was a tariff issue. And when I'm raising him, I haven't finished this article yet. I'll finish when I get back. What I'm raising in my article today is which one of the two sides would be closer to the foundation moments of the country in terms of the revolution that started this country, and that would be the South is closest to it. Because the objection of the South is the same objection as the founding members of this country. They are objecting to the taxes. And that's why Lincoln is not going to be discussed in this whole thing that's happening right now. Have you heard Lincoln's name? No. And I'll tell you next week why that is also true. You cannot discuss Lincoln. And they will not bring his name up. And that'll be another dinner. You haven't won anything yet. Okay, I got to get out of here. John's saying roll it off. He's doing this right here. And that means if I don't get out of here, he'll saw his neck off. So I have to leave, and I'll get to you next week, and I will read this starting out next week. Until that time, I want you to follow your dream. Because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.